Substitution. We are on week 8, which is exciting. And we are going to be on page 35. So this is going to go a little bit out of order. So yesterday, I think you guys, we did 31. No, we started like on 29, and it was like a 4-page lesson because of that vocab. So we're going to skip over that 34 and 33, page 33 and 34. We're going to come back to it in just a little bit. Okay, so today's video is about substitution. And really we're using substitution with the systems of equations, okay? So substitution is about solving a system of equations by switching equal parts. So remember, substitution is like if you need a sub in soccer or you need a sub in American football, you sub out a player or you switch out a player. But what's really important is it's an equal part. So if you're switching out a forward, you would want a forward to go in. You wouldn't want to put a goalie in for a forward. So equal parts is important. So substitution means to replace or to switch with something equal. So something that means the same thing. Okay. So for example, I've seen this a lot lately in our classes, in our Google chat. Instead of saying yeah, a lot of students are writing YH, which is goofy to me because yeah isn't that much longer, but that's okay. Another thing could be like if you have, if you're trying to say that you're happy, you could use a lot of emojis to show that you are happy. So you just might use that happy smiley face emoji. Okay? So lots of things that we switch out in real life. If you wear PJs, a lot of people call them pajamas, but you could call them PJs. Lots of things like that. All right, so for problem 1 here, it says use the substitution to solve the equation for x. So here we're trying to get x by itself, and we know that y is equal to 3. So I'm going to use my highlighter, use blue. I know that y is equal to 3. And so in this first equation, 2x plus 5y equals -1, I know that this y is the same thing as 3. So we can just throw that in there, okay? So the rest of the equation, it says 2x plus 5, and in parentheses, I'm going to put what that y was. That y is really a 3. All right, equals -1. So if any of you ever watched like Scooby-Doo, you know, like how there's always a villain and they like unmask the villain and they're like, oh, it was really the caretaker all along. It's kind of the same thing here. It's a y, but we're like, oh, it was really 3 all along. I don't know. Made sense to me. Anyways, 2x plus 5 times 3 is 15 equals -1. Okay? And now we're just solving this equation. It's just an easy 2-step equation. So to undo adding 15, we are going to subtract 15. And if we do that on one side, we're going to do it on the other side. Okay. And then we're left with 2x equals, and we have -1 and -15. And they're both negatives. So if they're both negatives, that means it's going to end up being another negative. And 15 plus 1 is 16. Divide both sides by 2. If at any point you want to use Desmos calculator to help you solve this, that would be great. Especially when we move on, if we goof up the first part, it's going to goof up our second part. So it's really important that when we do this, we're really taking our time and knowing how to get to that final answer. I'm going to skip part B here because we are going to do this later on. We could take time to do it, but we're going to do it. There's 4 examples, and we're going to do this within those examples, so we'll just come back to it. All right, so this one says solve the system of equations using substitution. So this time, when we get to our solution, we want our solution to look like x, comma, y. Okay. So we need to figure out what is x and what is y. And when I look at the system, I see that y is already by itself. It says y equals negative 4x, let's use green, 4x, plus 12, and then I have 2x plus y. So the first thing I'm going to do is replace this y, similar to how we replaced the y up here with 3. But this time, when we replace it, we're going to replace it with this whole amount. This whole thing is going to go in for y. Okay? So I'm going to write this over here. We have 2x plus, and that says y. So anytime I substitute in systems, I always use parentheses. So parentheses, and then that whole thing, negative 4x plus 12, parentheses, equals 2. So I am really writing the same thing here, but instead of using y, I'm just writing out what y is the same as. Y is the same as this, so we can throw that in there. Okay, since there's no number in front of the parentheses, we can assume it's a 1, or we can just undo the parentheses. So we could just write this as 2x plus negative 4x plus 12, because there's no number in front to distribute. Pew, pew. Now we're going to solve this equation. Before we solve, we are going to simplify. So I see that we have 2 x's here. I have a 2x and a negative 4x. So we want to combine these like terms. And remember, we add those coefficients, those numbers in front of the x's. So 2 plus the negative 4, they're different, so we would subtract. So 4 minus 2 is 2. And we have more negatives, so negative 2x plus 12 equals 2. And now we're at that nice, comfortable 2-step equation that I know a lot of you are getting really good at. So to undo adding 12, we would do a minus 12. And if we do that on one side, we do it on the other. So then we're just left with negative 2x equals, and 2 minus 12. Since we have a positive and a negative, we could just subtract. And 12 minus 2 is 10. But we're subtracting the larger number. So it's going to end up being negative. Okay, and then our last step here is to divide everything by negative 2. Now this is where it's really important we're really being careful, because here I made this video before and I wrote x equals negative 5, and then I got a completely wrong answer for my y, and I had to go back and figure out where I got this wrong. So negative 10 divided by negative 2 is a positive 5. So now I know in my solution my x is 5, and I need to figure out what is my y. So I'm going to go back to this original equation where it says y equals negative 4, and now it says x. And before we didn't know what x was, so we couldn't simplify it. But now we know x is 5. So negative 4 times 5, all right, plus 12. Now we just need to simplify this. Y is already by itself, so we just need to find this answer. So if we're multiplying and adding, we're going to multiply first. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. And we have negative 20 plus 12. And negative 20 plus 12 is going to give us 8. And again, I would use Desmos for that. And we have more negatives, so negative 8. So negative 8. So that's our solution. So if we plug that into each of these, we could have 2 times 5 plus negative 8. It would give us 2. we know that negative 8 is equal to negative 4 times 5 plus 12. It works for both of those equations. All right, next page, we have 3 examples on this one. We have one that's really similar to the one we just did, and then we have one that's a little different. All right, so number 3, we have 2x minus 6y equals 22. Okay, so we have 2x, nope, we're using blue for y, sorry. 2x minus 6y equals 22. And then we have x equals 2y plus 8. So in this case, we already have an x equals, and so because of that, we are going to use this whole amount of x, and we're going to plug that in for this x, because we already know x equals this amount. So for our equation, we're going to write 2, and then in parentheses, instead of saying x, I'm going to say whatever that x was equal to. So in parentheses, I'm going to write that 2y plus 8. Parenthesis. And that 2 is right in front, because that's right where it was in that equation, minus 6y equals 22. And now we're going to solve this. But before we start doing inverse operations, we need to get rid of those parentheses and simplify this side, make it a little bit easier. Remember, if we can get it to that 2-step equation, our lives will be a lot better. Okay, so we're going to distribute. Pew, pew. That means to multiply. So 2 times 2 is 4, so we get 4y. And then 2 times 8 is 16. And then this minus 6y is just chilling by itself still. Equals 22. Okay. Now if we look at it, it's still not quite down to that 2-step equation. We have this 4y here and this minus 6y here. We could use the commutative property and rewrite it so they're next to each other. But at this point, we kind of know that that's in our brain. So we're thinking, what is 4 minus 6? So 4 minus 6 is 2. Oops, I don't want purple. Blue. 2. And we did a smaller number minus a bigger number, so it's going to end up being negative. So negative 2y plus 16 equals 22. Now it's at that nice, comfortable 2-step equation. So to get y by itself, we're going to undo this 16 first, so subtract 16. And we end up with negative 2y equals, and 22 minus 16 is 6. Yeah, because you'd borrow, then that'd be 12. All right, so then divide both sides by negative 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3, and a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So in our solution, remember our solution always goes x comma y. So now we know the y, so we know the second part is going to be negative 3. So now we need to find the x, and to find the x, we're going to take this negative 3 and plug it back into this original equation that we started with where it says x equals. So I'm going to have x equals, ignore that email for a moment, 2, and that says y. So remember, we're going to use parentheses, and our y is this negative 3. So when we substitute in, using parentheses makes it really easy for us to remember when we have to distribute and when we can just multiply or when we can just go for it. Okay, so for this example, when we have this 2 times negative 3, we're just going to multiply it because there's no variable on the inside, so we don't need to distribute. Okay, so 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, so negative 6 plus 8, and negative 6 plus 8. They're different, so we would subtract. 8 minus 6 is 2, and we have more positives, so positive 2. And again, using Desmos would be a good situation here. Okay, ignore that for Mr. Tyson. I don't know what to say about them. They like to message jokes back and forth in the morning. This is what my mornings are like with them. All right, so then we're done because that's our solution, 2, -3. If we did 2 times 2 minus 6 times -3, we would end up with 22. We also know that 2 equals 2 times -3 plus 8. It works for both the equations. All right, number 4 is a little bit more complicated. You can see we have these lines. That's going to be to help us separate out our work. Okay, but also if we look back at this example here, we know that we can't just start plugging things in. It's not going to just work. Okay, so in this problem, we need to solve one of these equations for one of the variables. So we need to have one of the equations to be like x equals, or in example 2, where it said y equals. We need that to start with. And in this problem, we don't have either of those started with us. So we are going to get one of them to be that. And in this first example, do you see how x is already kind of by itself? In the first equation, not example, sorry. In this first equation, x is by itself. So that's going to be the easiest to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label this top one A and this bottom one B. And we're going to kind of bounce between these two. Okay? Think about like if you were playing soccer, if you subbed out your forward, and then eventually you might sub out your forward again back to that original player. I know in hockey when you do line switches, that's how it works, where like you have 3 lines. So eventually when you, after 3 times, you get back to that original amount. It's kind of that same thing that we're going to be doing here, or the original players. Okay, so we are going to start with A, equation A. In equation A, it says x minus 2y equals -3. And I'm going to solve this so that we get x by itself. Okay. So we have to undo this minus 2y. So to undo a minus 2y, we are going to add 2y. And if we do it to one side, we do it to the other side. And we want to move the whole thing. That's why we're undoing the subtraction. So now the 2y is undone. So we're left with just the x equals. And then over here, these are not like terms, so we cannot combine them. We could write it as -3 plus 2y. Usually we want our variables to come first. We're going to write 2y plus and then -3. So now x is all alone, so we can pop over to b. But when we do b, we're not going to write 3x. We're going to write in this whole amount that x equals. I'm going to use my highlighter to show that. So this right here, 2y plus -3, that's going to go in for that x. Okay. So for part B, we're going to say 3, and then in parentheses what x was equal to. X was equal to 2y plus -3. So 2y plus -3. Okay. Plus 5y equals 24. And our goal here is to figure out what is y, because we only have y's in this equation now. So first we're going to start off by distributing, because we do need to simplify this side. So 3 times 2 gives me 6, so 6y. 3 times -3 is -9. And then this plus 5y is still chilling, just hanging out. Not sure really what to do with itself. Okay, equals 24. Now again, we want to combine our like terms. So we have this 6y here and this 5y. And so we're going to add those together, and 6 plus 5 is 11. So we get 11y plus -9 equals 24. And now we're at that nice, comfortable two-step equation. So we have to undo this adding -9. So to undo adding a negative 9, we are going to add a positive 9. And if we do that on one side, we're going to do it on the other side. Because the inverse of adding a negative is adding a positive. So we end up with 11y equals 24 plus 9. I'm bad at math. 33. Okay, and then to get rid of that multiplying by 11, we divide by 11. So y equals, and then 33 divided by 11 is 3. So in my solution, I know it looks like this is the solution, but that's actually for the next problem. In my solution, I know y is 3. So I'm going to put that in that second place because remember it goes x, y. All right, now we're going to pop back to equation A. So it's kind of goofy. We go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So go A, B, A. Okay. Now in equation A, we now know that y is 3. So I'm going to have x minus 2 times y, and our y is 3. So 2 times 3 equals negative 3. So I went back to that original equation that they wrote. Okay. So what is 2 times 3? 2 times 3 is 6 equals negative 3. And then to undo a minus 6, we would add 6 to both sides. So x equals, and then these are different, so we'd subtract. 6 minus 3 is 3, and we have more positives. It's positive 6. So x is also 3. So that's going to go in that first part. So our answer is 3, 3. All right, last one. And again, this one's not going to be that 3-stepper because we don't have an equation solved for x or we don't have an equation solved for y. In number 4, we knew to solve for x because it was already by itself. There was no coefficient, or it had a coefficient of 1. Here, all of our variables have coefficients. So we're going to want to think what's going to be the easiest thing to divide by, because eventually when we solve, we're going to divide by some numbers. So would it be easiest to do negative 7 divided by 5? Nope. Would it be easiest to do 5 divided by negative 7? Nope. Can we do 4 divided by 2? Yep. So we're going to do that, where we're going to get this 2, we're going to use that to divide, which means we want to get that y by itself, which I should use blue then. Okay, so for our equations here, this bottom one is actually going to be A, and this top one is going to be B. And so we're going to go in that same format, A, B, A. So I'm going to start with equation A. And equation A says 4x plus 2y equals 8. Now, if you decided to solve for any of the other variables, that would be okay. You would get the same answer, but you're going to deal a lot with fractions. And fractions just aren't my favorite, and my students know that. I really am not a fan. So we're going to subtract 4x because we're going to get y by itself. And so we keep the 2. If we do that on one side, we do that on the other side. So this 2y just drops down. It's staying the same. And remember when we solve this, usually we want that x term to come first. We're going to say negative 4x plus, and then it's a positive 8. It's a positive 8. And now to undo this 2, we are going to divide everything by 2. So we end up with y equals negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be negative 2. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. So plus 4. So now we know what y is equal to. We got one of the variables by itself. Like I said, if you solved any of the other equations for x or y, you would have gotten not this as your answer, but in the end, our solution would be the same. You would just have to be really careful to do your fractions. All right, so now I'm going to go to equation B. And in equation B, we have negative 7x minus 5y. So negative 7x minus 5. And instead of y, I'm going to plug in what y was equal to. So in parentheses, negative 2x plus 4. And it equals negative 23. Okay, so we're going to start off by distributing. And remember, when we distribute this 5, it is actually a negative 5. It's that whole thing. So pew, pew. So we have negative 7x, and then negative 5 times negative 2. Negative 5 times negative 2 gives me a positive 10x, and then we have to multiply again. Negative 5 times 4. So negative 5 times a positive 4 gives me a negative 20 equals negative 23. Okay. And again, we have those like terms. We have this negative 7x and this 10x. So we're going to combine those together. So negative 7 plus 10, they are different signs, so we subtract. 10 minus 7 is 3. And we have more positives this time because 10 is a bigger number than 7. So 3x plus negative 20 equals negative 23. And then we're going to get x by itself. So we're going to keep that 3. We undo this adding negative 20. So we're going to add 20 to both sides. And we are left with this 3x equals negative 23 plus 20. They're different, so we would subtract. 23 minus 20 is 3. But this time we have more negatives because there's 23 negatives, there's only 20 positives. And then divide both sides by 3. And x equals negative 3 divided by 3 would be negative 1. So in our solution, my x comes first, that's going to be negative 1. Okay. So now we're bouncing back to that original. It's going to go A, B, A. So in A, we have 4x plus 2y equals 8. And we know what x is. X is negative 1. So we're going to write 4, and then in parentheses, negative 1 plus 2y equals 8. And then we're solving that for y. So 4 times negative 1 would give us negative 4 plus 2y equals 8. Okay, and this is our nice cozy two-step equation. So y is with the 2. Those are besties, so we keep them together. We get rid of this negative 4, so we're going to add 4. And if we do it on one side, do it on the other side. And we end up with 2y equals 8 plus 4 is 12. And then undo this multiplying by 2. We're going to divide by 2, divide by 2. So y equals 12 divided by 2, which is 6. So in our pair here, y is 6, which again means if we plug in negative 1 and positive 6 in for the x and the y, we're going to get true equations. All right, don't forget to do your takeaways. There's a lot to take away from this one and not a lot of space. So maybe there's an example you want to look at, or maybe say always look for x equals or y equals first, and then go back and do that, okay? Then there's an Alex assignment. You're going to want a piece of paper out. Oof, I'm tired. You're going to want a piece of paper out to show your work because you're going to have to do like this stuff. So you're going to want a piece of paper out to show your work for Alex. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging to all do it in your head.